countdown. So we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Mary Bathon. Welcome to day 3 of Wellness Week. If you haven't met me by now on a different virtual event, I'm the Assistant Director of Alumni Events, putting together all of these fun programs for you. Like I said, this is Wellness Week. And I know typically when we think of wellness, we think of exercise and healthy eating. But today, I think we're going to be diving into something maybe that's even more important than all of that, which is understanding what mental fitness is and then how we can stop self-sabotaging ourselves. So today's session will be highly interactive. Feel free to ask questions or add comments in the chat box. There'll also be a lot of opportunities for you to unmute yourself and respond to Amy's questions and prompts. So don't be shy. Just remember to keep yourself on mute during the presentation so we don't get that background noise. As a reminder, this session is being recorded, but none of the audience faces or names will be included in the recording. So feel free to turn your camera on to see your lovely faces. So before we get started, I want to introduce our speaker for today. Please help me welcome Amy Yip. Amy is a 2004 UMD alum. She receives a bachelor's in computer science and communications. After graduating, Amy spent about 16 years at large corporations like Google and Clorox and Booz Allen Hamilton. And then in January 2020, she quit her job at Google, sold her belongings in her New York City apartment, and took a one-way flight to Ghana with her husband to volunteer at a breast cancer nonprofit. The plan was to volunteer until about May and then travel the world. Clearly, COVID changed that. And she actually was stuck in Ghana for 7 months when the borders closed. So I'll let her tell you a little bit more about that. But she just told me that she's joining us from Albania today. So I'm interested to hear and what happened after that. So Amy is a certified life transformation and mental fitness coach. She works primarily with women to connect them more deeply to their sense of self and let go of all these shoulds so they can finally be the author of their own life story, because she believes that if you don't tell your story, someone else will. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Amy.
Thank you for the warm introduction. Welcome, everyone, and greetings from Albania. So thank you for being here today for this Boosting Your Mental Fitness talk. As Mary said, I'm Amy Yip. I'm a life transformation and mental fitness coach, and I'm a Maryland 04 alum. So it is an honor and a privilege to be back here with the Maryland community, even though it is virtually. The purpose of today's talk, in case you weren't aware, is to take you through boosting your mental fitness. I will go through what it is, why it's important, and then we'll work on how to strengthen those mental muscles. The talk itself will probably be around 35-40 minutes. And throughout the presentations, I'll be asking questions. So let's be interactive. If you have the ability to, please turn on your camera. I'd love to see your beautiful faces here. And I will be asking questions throughout, so you can unmute yourself. So before we get started, I am curious, and you can either use, there's the reactions capability on Zoom, and I believe you can raise your hand there, or you can, if your camera's on, you can physically raise your arm. But I am curious, how many of you have struggled to prioritize and take care of your own well-being because it feels like you're constantly taking care of everyone and everything else? You can raise your hand if that's you. Okay. Or perhaps you might have held back on doing something because of fear of some sort, maybe self-doubt, whether it's a hobby, a career, a relationship. Some part of you said, yes, this will be awesome. And then fear stepped in and told you, no, 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 that's a bad idea. Yeah, I see some hands raised. Or how many of you have experienced or struggled with staying positive and motivated with what life has thrown you, especially during times like these? Yeah. Great. So when you start to strengthen your mental fitness, you'll be able to develop mastery over your own mind. You'll ultimately learn how to recognize those self sabotaging thoughts, the ones that push you harder and harder, the ones that make you feel guilty, the ones that tell you you're not good enough, that question your own capabilities, and the ones that are causing constant stress and fatigue and exhaustion. And first, I want to share a little about why I'm passionate and how I even got here. So, as Mary mentioned, in January 2020, I sold all my belongings. I was living in New York at the time. And with just a backpack on our backs, my husband and I took a one-way flight to Ghana. It has been a lifelong dream of ours. And we went to Ghana to volunteer at a breast cancer nonprofit. And our plan was to volunteer until May and then travel the world. We didn't have an end date in mind. And then something called COVID came along, and that changed our plans for us. We ended up getting stuck in Ghana until September because their borders closed. So there were no flights or anything going in and out of the country. And when borders reopened in September, we decided, well, all we have is a backpack on our backs. We don't have a home in the US, didn't want to risk staying with our parents and putting them at risk. So we looked at what was available in the world for Americans to go to, very small list. Serbia was one of them, so we took off for Serbia, and we've been exploring Eastern Europe since then. So every few months when our visas expire, we move to a new home. And so right now I'm in Albania, and this is my home until our visas expire and we have to find a new home, and we'll see what countries are permitting us in. And the reason I share this with you is I've had a ton of people tell me that's super brave to leave Google and do what you did. I wish that I could do that. And then they would typically follow it up with something like, but I can't because of where my career is. I can't just drop it all and leave. Or I'm the breadwinner and I just can't do that. My family relies on my income. Or I'm at a prime age for starting a family. So I need to focus on getting pregnant and pregnancy. Or I have a family and I just can't do something like that. And the reality is that there will never be a right time for living your dreams, no matter what that is. And I promise that I'm not any braver than you. I'm not any more courageous than any of you. And it wasn't easy for me either because I felt super stuck. I had a lot of shoulds. My career at Google was going really well, and everyone was saying, why would you leave a company like Google? You should just stay. My parents were aging, and I'm the youngest of three girls. And so my sisters told me, you should not do this thing because you should be taking care of our parents. My husband started pursuing his own venture, and I was the breadwinner. And in my head, I was telling myself all these shoulds, like, I should be the stable one. I should be the one that's responsible while he did his thing. And one of the biggest shoulds during that time was everyone telling me, you're at the prime baby making age. You're going to regret it if you don't. You should just have babies now. And so my husband and I, we decided to freeze our embryos as a backup plan. A year later, there was a mishap at the facility, and let's just say I still don't know the viability of those embryos until we're ready to use it. And I went on a long self-help journey because I felt I did not know what to do. I read every book out there for 8 months. If you need book recommendations, I'm happy to share some, but I read every book for 8 months. I even went down to Peru for an ayahuasca ceremony, and I needed clarity. I wanted clarity. But it wasn't until I got a coach who helped me to peel back the layers of what really mattered that I figured out who I was at my core. And I made two decisions at that point. One was I'm going to leave Google to pursue my dreams because I will regret it if I don't. And the other is I want to become a coach and I want to help people because being stuck really sucked. And one of my greatest learnings along this journey is that your mindset, not your circumstance, makes all the difference in your happiness and your success. And mental fitness is what helped me to pursue my dreams, to quit my job and do all of that, to pivot when I was stuck in Ghana for 7 months with my husband in a tiny little room, and to really have a stronger relationship with myself and others. And that's why I'm so passionate about it. And that's why I'm here today bringing this to you. So, can everyone see this?
Yes, you're good.
Okay. So, the topic of today is mental fitness. And as I shared, mental fitness really, really helped me when I was stuck. Um, it's still something that I leverage today. And I'm curious, anybody, what do you think mental fitness is anyway? You can unmute, you can type in the chat. I'd love to hear what you think.
I think it's the ability to be resilient and move forward if you're comfortable doing so.
Mm-hmm. Resiliency, moving forward, luminosity or brain games. Any other thoughts on what you think mental fitness is all about? What brought you here?
I think
Courage, toughness.
this is like a lot about resilience in hard times, and then also, focusing on the good things and like being in the present moment.
Being in the present, focusing on the good things, active thinking, mental flexibility, confidence. Right. So the way, mental fitness is essentially your capacity to respond to life's challenges with a positive mindset rather than a negative mindset and getting upset and stressed. And if we were to use a physical analogy right now to bring this to life, if you have average physical fitness and you wanted to climb Kilimanjaro, it might be pretty challenging. You could probably climb small hills easily, but if a big mountain is put in front of you and your physical fitness is not strong enough to handle it, then as you're climbing, you might be out of breath, you might be getting physically stressed. And the same thing is happening for many of us right now. Most of us have average mental fitness. And what's happening in the world right now is a mountain of challenges. And so if we were to use this analogy, what you begin to see as possibility is that this thing that's getting us all stressed, maybe I'm not able to handle what it's bringing and getting upset and stressed, but maybe I shouldn't be blaming the mountain. Maybe the mountain is just a mountain and it's not a bad thing necessarily, right? Maybe the question to ask is, how do I build up my mental fitness so that I can climb this mountain that's in front of me and handle the challenges around me in such a way that I'm going to stay in this positive emotion rather than get stressed out and upset. And imagine when you get to the other side of this mountain, what happens for the rest of your life, right? The rest of your life is going to give you mid-level hills and you'll be thinking, hey, this is a piece of cake. The thing I also want to be clear on here is that mental fitness is not about curing a mental health issue or that anything is wrong. It's not about healing. It's not about fixing. And it comes from this perspective and also this paradox that you're good as you are, you're okay as you are, and there's always more opportunity for growing, for getting outside your comfort zone, right? For development, for becoming more effective. And the notion is also that we all have different starting points. So based on your starting point, can you become a better version of yourself today than you were yesterday, regardless of your starting point? And if we were to go back to the physical fitness analogy, right? Physical fitness is about how do you become a little more fit than you were yesterday? right? There are individuals with physical disabilities like Maynard, who climbed Kilimanjaro and he does not have any limbs. And so the notion of fitness is not meant to be it's not meant to be exclusionary, right? So the key question to ask yourself is, can I become a 1% better of myself today than yesterday? So now that we know what mental fitness is, why do you think it is important? And you can feel free to put it in the chat. You could feel free to unmute yourself. Why do you think it's important?
So that when something like COVID happens, we don't get stuck. And then when COVID begins to open up, like it is doing now, we're still stuck and can't move forward.
Yeah. And I love that example because I was just reading today an article about how so many people, as the world is starting to open up, are now stressed about, now how do I go back to before, right? We're so used to being in this space now with masks and being like, stay 6 feet away from people. And there's this notion of, oh no, can I, and do I really feel safe, and this sense of safety. Can adjust and have options, know who we are every day. Yeah. So the thing to recognize why mental fitness is so important is only 20% of change comes from insight. That's why when I read books for 8 months, when I felt completely stuck, I was reading books and gaining a lot of really great knowledge, but only 20% of change is insight. Right? That's why you can read a lot of books, attend all these workshops, and change is hard. And that's because 80% is mental muscle and habit. For example, and you can raise your hands if this resonates, who here wants to be healthier? Who knows what you need to be healthier? Any volunteers? Want to
Getting
unmute
enough,
yourself?
getting enough sleep, trying to at least do 20 to 30 minutes of some kind of exercise every day, eating better.
Yeah, right, exactly. And the thing, and most people know this, right? So a lot of people constantly say, I want to get healthier. We all know the basic essential things to being healthier. So what is standing in your way from getting healthier? And so the thing is, we all have the knowledge that we need, but 80% of it comes from building those habits. And that's why so many of us end up staying stuck. And the other fun fact, so guess how many thoughts the average person has each day? You can do it in the chat. Anybody who wants to unmute yourself, how many thoughts do you think we have a day?
Thousands.
Thousands, 100,000, 7,000. Okay, so there's a range. We have between 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts per day on average. Okay, so it depends on the day, obviously. And how many do you think of those 12 to 60,000 thoughts are negative? What percentage?
80%.
80%, half, 70%, all. So 75%, 60. Okay, so the answer is 80%. 80% are negative. Yay, you win a prize. Now take a wild guess. How many of those 12 to 60,000 thoughts a day do you believe are repeated day after day after day? 50, all, 80, all, half, 50.
Most.
Yes, 95%, right? So out of the 12 to 80,000, 60,000 thoughts a day, 80% are negative, and 95% are the same thoughts day after day after day after day. And this is why change is hard for many of us, because we're constantly having those same thoughts, and a lot of our thoughts are negative. And what consumes your mind consumes your life. And that's why growing your mental fitness is so critical to building lasting change, to building those neural wirings, to, if, when something like COVID hits, to be able to survive that, and not just survive, but to thrive through it. And now that the world is reopening, to be able to thrive through that and be able to adjust and change with what is coming. So today, I'll go through a quick background on positive intelligence research, the 3 core mental fitness muscles, and then we'll put it all together and we'll practice together. So it will be interactive. At a very high level, the concept of mental fitness, as I'm talking about it today, is based on research, and it is based on positive intelligence research, which was conducted by Shirzad Shamin. And he was CEO of one of the largest coaching organizations, a researcher, a Stanford lecturer, and his research was done on over 500,000 people, so 500,000 participants from 50 countries in the world. And I'm not going to get into all the details of his research. If you're interested in it, you can pick up the book on Amazon. What I do want to share is that his research essentially found that there are 3 core muscles at the root of mental fitness. And they are, the first is saboteur interceptor muscle. The second is the sage muscle. And the third is the self-command muscle. And you're probably sitting there like, what the heck are those? And I'm glad that you're wondering that, because that's what we're going to dive into today. So before we dive into the muscles and I explain them and we practice and learn how to build them, I want to share an analogy with you to give you a picture of what's happening inside of your mind. And the analogy is a Star Wars analogy. So I do hope that you are Star Wars fans, and I will be referring to some of this analogy along the way. So mental fitness has often been associated or referred to as Jedi mind training. And the reason is because what we realize is happening inside of our brain is that there is this constant war going on between this inner Jedi and this inner Darth Vader. And we have these characters inside of our head, and there's always this war going on, right? And that's why we love Star Wars so much, because it's essentially the story of us humans on screen. So you can think of the Saboteurs as the Jedi, the inner Jedi, or no, the Saboteurs are the Darth Vaders. They are the agents of self-sabotage. The sage is your inner Jedi. So you can think of this war happening in your brain between the Saboteurs and the sage. How many of you have witnessed this before inside your head? You feel like there's this inner war of the Saboteur and the sage. Yeah? Yes. Lots of hand raises. Awesome. So that is why 2 of the key muscles are the saboteur interceptor and the sage muscle. And we're going to start by diving into the saboteur interceptor. And this muscle is all about intercepting that Darth Vader inside of your head, right? Preventing them from doing all the damage and the stress and the thing that's telling you, oh no, the world's opening up, but I can't go out because I've got to stay 6 feet away and keep this mask on and do all these things, and keeping you worried and stressed. And in order to understand the saboteur, we need to talk a little about the survival brain. And it's because survival is our #1 priority. So very early on, we learned survival strategies for keeping us safe, secure, and accepted. And this dates back to caveman, cavewoman days. And what do you think we were trying to survive from? It was this thing. the saber-toothed tiger, right? So during our cavemen and cavewomen days, we needed to survive from the saber-toothed tiger, right? When it came, we needed to know, do I fight, flight, or freeze? We also needed to be liked and accepted into the tribe. And it was also for survival reasons, because if you think about it, are you more likely to survive if you're a part of a tribe or if you're alone when this thing comes at you? Right. And so our human instinct and our human mind has evolved over all these hundreds of thousands of years. But unfortunately, we are still constantly putting survival as the number one thing. We're constantly assessing, am I fitting in? Am I doing anything that could get me rejected? Right? Like, if you're in a new team culture, you're scanning around to see, how do I fit in? Because I want to be accepted by the tribe. And it's part of our survival function. And at the end of the day, we are trying to assess, am I worthy enough to be accepted into this tribe? And even though we don't have to survive from this saber-toothed tiger anymore, we are still constantly doing things, sometimes unconsciously, and trying to assess, how do I need to act or be to fit in? And we're also judging other people. And it's for survival also. It's for the same reason. We're trying to figure out, are they the enemy or are they part of my tribe? Right? And so we're constantly judging, and that is why the judge is the master saboteur. It is the only saboteur that all of us have. I have it, you have it, I promise. Like, your spouse has it, your partner has it, your colleagues have it. And the judge has three modalities. So the first is that it is the judgment of self. And this is also known as the inner critic, right? It is the voice that tells you, oh, you idiot, you didn't get the job. You're a complete failure. Or it's looking at all those people around you that are succeeding, and it'll say to you something like, well, everyone else is doing well. What's wrong with you? It is the thing that's constantly berating you for past imperfections, future failures, and really making you anxious. The second mode of the judge is judgment of others. So it is constantly sizing up other people. It's the voice that's saying, oh, this one's too ugly, that one's too dumb, this one's too lazy, right? It's constantly looking for what is wrong in other people and judging them. And the third is something that maybe you're not even aware of, but it is the judgment of circumstances. It is the thing that is, when coronavirus first came, said this is bad, bad, bad. It is the thing that is now saying coronavirus is, everything is starting to open, and that is scary and wrong, and there's all these things that are bad. It is the thing that also tells you, you will not be happy until you have a certain job, until you have a certain career, until you get all those things on your to-do list done, right? It is the voice that is constantly looking at different situations and circumstances and telling you that until this is over or until this thing happens, everything is not right. And the master saboteur, this judge, has different accomplices, and they all have different names, and we all have a few of these accomplices. And the research has shown that there's 9 of them. And the 9 accomplices are the controller, the hyperachiever, the restless, the stickler, the pleaser, the hypervigilant, the avoider, the victim, and the hyperrational. What a cast of characters, right? And I'm sure some of you might be sitting there and saying, oh yeah, my boss definitely has the controller. Or my partner has the stickler and it drives me up the wall. Or my colleague has the avoider. They never want to get anything done and it frustrates me. And I don't encourage you to be focusing on other people's saboteurs right now, because to build your mental fitness, you want to get intimately familiar with your own, because that's how we tend to self-sabotage. That's what is causing us the stress, is these saboteurs that we have, right? That's what the research is showing us. I also want to emphasize not to feel bad for having any of these saboteurs. We all have some to some extent, and it's okay. It's good to know, because that's how you shift. And so Mary posted up the link where you can take the assessment. So if you go to positiveintelligence.com, you can take a free assessment and get results to show you which are your top saboteurs. And some of you have taken the assessment. It is very fast, like 5 minutes. And it's also pretty scary how accurate it is, if for those who have taken it, right? And so this assessment that you see on the screen, this is mine. So when you take it, you basically get something like this, and you get a list of your top saboteurs. So mine is controller, pleaser, hyperachiever. And when you get the assessment, you can dig in further. And you'll also receive a description of each of your saboteurs. And essentially, this will help you to see all the ways that the saboteur lies to you, right? So all of the things that it says to you. So for example, one of my top saboteurs was hyperachiever. And so I get this huge description about it. And if you've taken the assessment, and if you're looking at this and thinking, oftentimes a lot of people think, well, isn't being an achiever a good thing? And the thing I want to emphasize is all saboteurs are strengths overused. So you can also think of it like a knife. A knife can be used by a surgeon to save someone's life, and it could also be used by a murderer to kill somebody. And so saboteurs are basically using your strengths in a negative way, right? Strengths of a hyperachiever is you're capable of growing yourself, you're driven, you're pragmatic, you're inner directed. But one of the impacts on yourself is probably that it tells you constantly, you will be happy when. And you're constantly striving for the achievement. And then you're running up this mountain, you've achieved the mountain. How long are you up at the top celebrating that success? Were you happy when you're at the top? More than likely, for people with the hyperachiever saboteur, you're at the top, you're looking around and you're like already looking for the next mountain to climb, right? You're not savoring in that moment and truly celebrating. And so truly we're seeking happiness from it, but how long were you really happy for? And so that's the thing with all of the saboteurs, is that they have these lies, right? They tell you we'll bring you happiness, but they don't. And so the way to think about the description that you get after you take the assessment is like posting a wanted poster, right? So that you can catch it faster. So we're basically creating this wanted poster so that you can recognize the lies of your saboteur faster, right? The key is to get to know it so well that when it shows up, you can catch it. You can say, oh, there you are. And this is the first step. This is the saboteur interceptor muscle, because that's how you build up that muscle. It's all about awareness. Okay. So that was your saboteur interceptor muscle. And again, the goal here is to recognize your saboteurs, recognize the lies, because they are all lies. They will they give you these little breadcrumbs and promise you happiness and joy, when the reality is they're full of lies and they cause the stress and the upset. I'm going to pause here and see if there are any questions.
Yes, I don't know anything about this survey that you should take, and what is the website again, or how do I get to it?
Mary posted the link in the chat.
I don't have a chat on my iPhone.
It's positiveintelligence.com/assessments.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
I can also send it again after the session, or if you
Okay.
still have your confirmation email, it was in there too. Just send me an email if you can't find it.
Okay, positiveintelligence.com/what?
Assessments.
Thank you.
Yep.
I have a question, Amy.
Yes.
How did you recognize your saboteurs when you made the decision to quit Google and take your life elsewhere?
That's a,
Like, can
a
you give us?
yeah. So when you will recognize when you are in saboteur mode when you are feeling negative emotions. And the thing is with negative emotions, they're not a bad thing, right? You won't you won't be able to have positive emotions without negative emotions, but it's recognizing when you're in negative emotions. I like to use the analogy of having a hand on a hot stove, right? If you have your hand on a hot stove, how long do you want your hand on there? 1 second, right? Feeling that pain is useful because it brings you awareness and you recognize my hand's on the hot stove and I need to do something about it. But keeping your hand on there is not so great. And so it's good to feel the negative emotions. I'm not saying we should not feel negative emotion, but it's recognizing that you're in that and then being able to switch off. So when I was going through what I went through, I was constantly afraid. I had a lot of anxiety and fear. So I had a fear. I'm 40 right now, right? And so I was in my late 30s at the time. And so my big fear was, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to have kids. Oh my gosh, like uh, I need to take care of my parents and I'm a horrible daughter if I don't take care of them. Right. What if I leave Google and I don't make any money and I'm just poor for the rest of my life? So I was spiraling in all these in anxiety and stress and all these negative emotions of fear. And that's when you can recognize when you are in saboteur mode.
Got it.
Is
Thanks.
that, yeah. And I'll talk through how to put it all together because step one is recognizing your saboteur mode, because until you can actually recognize the things it's telling you, the emotions, and be able to catch it, like the other two are not useful.
Amy, I have a question that was
Mhm.
submitted to me. They're wondering, where would limiting beliefs related to health issues or challenges fit in?
Do you have a specific example on a limiting belief?
If you sent me this question, do you have more clarification?
Like, is it,
So
I
chronic
can't,
issues such as pain.
so
Like
like
that cannot be a saboteur.
it depends. So, and there's a lot of examples of like, a lot of people also ask the question of, well, what about death? Well, what about like, right? And two great examples of this are, one is Christopher Reeves when he was thrown off and he had a spinal injury and he could, right? Like he could have sat in the negative emotions for the rest of his life, but he chose to go in the sage perspective, and that's the next muscle we'll go into, but he chose to make a difference with his life, right? He invested the rest of his life into spinal injury research and he started all these nonprofits and really made a difference in that world. Another one is Mothers Against Drunk Driving. The founder of Mothers Against Drunk Driving, her daughter was killed by a drunk driver. And so she used that as her fuel for wanting to make a difference in the world. And she started Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And it started as a very small grassroots type of organization. And then it grew. And it was because of her passion. And so that's, you can In all situations, right, you have a choice of, do I sit in these negative emotions? And this is not to say that grief does not have a place, but there's a difference between grief and then constantly sitting in a negative space, right? You still have to process through those emotions. And then you have that choice. What do I want to do now? And that's the choice. And it's the same with coronavirus. It's the same with all sorts of difficult challenges in life, because life will throw you these mountains. And so it's, how do you want to climb that mountain? All right. So I'm going to move on because this is one of my favorite muscles. This is the sage muscle. We went through the saboteur interceptor, and the second muscle is the sage, right? This is the inner Jedi. And the important piece to know here is that the saboteur and sage live in different parts of your brain. The saboteur lives in the side of your brain that's known as the survival brain. Remember that saber-toothed tiger? And this is in the left side of the brain. It is primarily for survival. And the sage lives on the right side of the brain. And if I were to put your brain under an MRI scan, you would actually be able to see the two different sides being activated in different ways. I don't want to go into all of the science behind it. There are 2 chapters in the Positive Intelligence book if you're curious about all of the details. But what I want everyone to realize is that there are 2 different parts in our brain. They're wired very differently. And when they get activated, they produce very different emotions. The sage side comes from the sage perspective. And this perspective is that every outcome or circumstance can be turned into a gift or opportunity, right? So the Mothers Against Drunk Driving story, and also Christopher Reeves, those were, they were able to turn their circumstance into a gift or an opportunity. So your saboteurs might be saying, well, that's stupid. This is dangerous. This is naive, right? If that part of the brain is activated. But when your sage is activated, we all know this is how the world works. And I want to tell you a story that really brings this to life. And it is the Stallion Story. So there's an old farmer, and he lives on a farm, and he has a teenage son and a beautiful stallion. And the stallion is one of his most prized possessions. And he enters the stallion into a competition, and his stallion wins first prize. And so his neighbors all come over and they congratulate him on his win. And he calmly says, "Who knows what is good? Who knows what is bad?" They're completely puzzled and they go away. And the next week, some thieves come. They heard about the stallion that had increased its value. And so they come and they steal the stallion. And so the neighbors come and they commiserate with him. And they're like, that sucks. We're so sorry. And he says, "Who knows what is good? Who knows what is bad?" And they're completely puzzled. They go away. Several days later, the stallion comes back. He escapes from the thieves and he makes his way back to the farm, and he brings with him a couple of wild mares. And the neighbors were all excited. They're congratulating the farmer. And he once again says, "Who knows what is good? Who knows what is bad?" Again, they're puzzled. They think he's losing his mind. And a few weeks later, his son is riding one of the wild mares. He's trying to break it in. And the wild mare throws his son off, and his son breaks his leg. And the neighbors come and they try to commiserate with him. And again, he says, "Who knows what is good? Who knows what is bad?" And then the following week, the army comes through and they're conscripting young men into the army for the war that's just broken out. And the son has been spared because his leg is broken. And the neighbors no longer come because they already know what he's going to say. And we all do too. So if you want to say it out loud with me, you can do so, right? What is he going to say? Who knows
Who knows
what is good?
good
Who
or
knows what is
what
bad?
is bad?
Yeah, thank you. And there's profound wisdom in this story. So if there's nothing else you take away from today, remember the Stallion story, right? Because everything changes with this perspective. And there's a great Einstein quote. The most important decision we make is whether we believe we live in a friendly or hostile environment. And the answer to this question determines our entire experience, right? There's actually research that has shown that what you're calling your experience, 80% of it is generated from inside of your head. Only 20% is the actual circumstance. So again, 80% of what we're calling our experience is being generated by what is happening inside of our brains. Only 20% is the actual external circumstance, right? So if we can remember that there's always a gift and opportunity in every circumstance, then that will shift how we think about a lot of things, right? Even in situations like breakups, for example. During the breakup, during the situation, like I've been through a lot of breakups. I thought it was the end of the world. I felt rejected and I was really upset. But now I realize all of those breakups were gifts, because if they didn't happen, I wouldn't be with my husband today. And I love him to death, right? I would be with one of those guys. And so being able to recognize there's a gift and opportunity in every circumstance is the sage perspective. And so the question of which perspective is true, is it the saboteur that everything is bad, or is it the sage that there's a gift? The answer is whichever you believe becomes true, right? One of my favorite quotes is, where focus goes, energy flows. When you believe something, you'll see more of it. So we talked about the saboteur interceptor, we talked about the sage, and the last one I want to talk about is the self-command muscle. So raise hands, or you can do it with the emotion reaction thing, or you can physically raise your hand. But who here thinks they are in control of their mind? Raise your hand. If you think you are in control of your mind, raise your hand. I see some hands.
I try.
Thank you. We should try. Okay, a few hands up. So how many of you still respond from a place of anxiety, frustration, guilt, shame, anger, even though you know it doesn't serve you? Some hands. Okay. So the thing that I want to look into, your names on the screens and some of your eyes on the screens, and I want to say to you and challenge you, you are not in command of your own mind. Because if you were in command of your own mind, would you really command your mind to wake you up at 3 a.m. and stress and worry about things that are not in your control, right? Maybe the presentation you have to do, maybe the meeting that you have with your boss or your huge to-do list, right? None of us choose to do that. None of us choose to wake up at 3 a.m. stressed. None of us choose to be stressed about whether or not we're going to get that promotion. And all of these things are not things we would choose. So if you are not choosing these things, then why is it happening? And it is because you are not running the show. You're not running your mind. Your mind is running the show. And too often it's doing it from the saboteur's perspective. It is that Darth Vader messing with you. And so the self-command muscle, this third muscle, is important because oftentimes when the saboteur takes over, when you're in those negative emotions, it's pretty hard to get out of it, right? When I'm spiraling in my negative emotions and I'm worrying and anxious, it's hard to get out of it. I can't just be like, oh, let me go to sage perspective. Doesn't work that way. And so what this muscle does is it helps you to shift from saboteur mode into sage mode. And so we do this with something called a PQ rep. And PQ stands for positive intelligence quotient. And so for physical fitness, if I wanted to, like, let's say I want to build up my bicep muscles, what would I do? I would pick up a dumbbell and I would like do some bicep curls. And so the equivalent of a dumbbell rep for building self-command muscle, which are the fibers right under your forehead, is a PQ rep. So we are going to practice a version of this. Okay, and you can keep your eyes open, you can keep your eyes closed if you want, whichever you choose, but take 2 fingertips and rub them together with such a tension that you can feel the fingertip ridges against each other. So gently rub 2 fingertips against each other and feel all the sensations of touch. Feel all your fingertip ridges. And that was about 10 seconds. And if I were to put your brain under an MRI machine, what you would notice is just those 10 seconds ever so slightly quieted the side of your brain where your saboteurs lived. And it ever so slightly activated the region of your brain where your sage lives. Right? That was just 10 seconds. That's not going to change everything. That's like me picking up a dumbbell and doing 1 bicep curl. I'm not going to build a ton of muscles from doing that. But what if you did a lot of these things, right? It'll build you up into a Jedi warrior. And that's what you want to be able to do. And so there are a lot of different ways of doing this. You could do it with visual, breath. You could wiggle your toes and pay attention to all your toes as you wiggle them. We're not going to have time to do all these different ways, but the thing to recognize is, one, there's different ways to do it. We all have different preferences, and being able to play around with them and finding one that resonates with you in those moments. And if you're into mindfulness and meditation, you'll notice that there's some similarities here. And this is essentially meditation and mindfulness are like special, you could think of them as specialized PQ reps, right? The beauty of what we just did is it was 10 seconds. You don't have to be a lifelong meditator. You don't have to close your eyes. If you think about in the middle of like a challenging meeting, you could be in a meeting with colleagues. Someone might have said something dumb, or you might have felt unheard, or someone might have missed a deadline, and you're in this meeting. You can't necessarily say, I need to go and meditate right now to calm down, so let me walk out right now, right? But what you can do is, without closing your eyes, you can actually just put 2 fingers together and do this and concentrate on the sensations until you shift out of that negative space. And so that's the beauty of this, is you could do it in any type of space. And the thing here is to be able to command your busy mind in the middle of the day. PQ stands for positive intelligence quotient. Someone posted that question. And so the idea here is to practice before you need it, to build that capacity. Musicians, athletes, artists, they spend a majority of their time practicing and in rehearsal for game time. By the time you're triggered, like if you haven't been doing this practice, it will be hard for you to make this a habit and to do this. And so what you want to do is build that habit, practice every day. While you're going, when you walk to the toilet, can you just do this with your fingers and feel the sensations of touch, right? When you're showering, can you really feel the temperature of water and focus on that? And so the idea is practice before you need it. And so there you have it. Those are the 3 core muscles. Okay. And the thing is, I want to be able to put it together for you to use it as almost like an operating system. And so if we were to take all 3 of those muscles, then if you're feeling any negative emotion, then stop, right? And we all know what it feels like to have those negative emotions when you're angry, when you're upset, when you're stressed, right? If you're feeling that, stop. It doesn't matter what just happened in the world, doesn't matter who is saying what or doing whatever. It's knowing I'm in negative emotion, that means I'm in saboteur mode. If you want to, you can even give it a name. So for example, I have the hypervigilant saboteur. I call her Miss Worrywart. So when she shows up, I say, oh, there you are, Miss Worrywart. I was expecting you. And then I stop. Okay. So just name it, stop. You don't need to justify. You don't need to do anything else. Step 2 is then do some PQ reps. Depending on the challenge, you might need to do longer PQ reps, or you might be able to just do a shorter one. It really depends. But we did the fingertip one. There are lots of different ones that you could possibly do. So do it until you can feel yourself no longer in that negative space, and then use the sage perspective, right? What might be the gift and opportunity in this circumstance? And that is it. So those are the 3 steps. And I want everyone to think of today as the equivalent of watching a how-to video on riding a bike, right? What we've done is the equivalent of that. Remember earlier I mentioned 20% of change comes from knowledge and insight. So I encourage you, for change to happen, you need to build those neural connections. Maybe find a buddy to do the practices with, hold you accountable, but really put that into practice. Okay, and for anybody who wants the link, positiveintelligence.com/assessments. And if you want to connect, feel free to connect. amyyipcoaching.com, or you can email me. Happy to chat. And I always love ending with this quote. It's one of my favorites. When you learn how much you're worth, you'll stop giving people discounts. So that is me. Any questions in the last minute?
If you have to leave right at 1 o'clock, this recording will be sent out in the next day or so. And like I said, feel free to follow up with Amy, but if anyone has any final questions, go ahead.